single spark could sink the ship. Fire was too risky, yet the cold was deadly. So how did pirates stay warm without either one killing them first? Their methods weren't just clever. Some bordered on disturbing. Life on a pirate ship in freezing waters wasn't like the movies. No flowing coats or dramatic poses when your fingers are too numb to grip a cutlass properly. These seafaring outlaws had to get creative with survival, and their first line of defense was surprisingly practical. Wool became their best friend. Pirates layered thick wool clothing underneath whatever outer garments they could steal or buy. The stuff worked even when wet, which happened constantly on deck. Smart pirates never wore just one layer. They'd pile on wool shirts, vests, and undergarments like they were building armor against the cold. But here's where it gets interesting. Those leather coats you see in paintings, they weren't just for show. Leather blocked ocean spray better than any fancy fabric. When icy water hit leather, it rolled right off instead of soaking through to freeze against your skin. Pirates learned this the hard way, literally the difference between life and death during storms. Then there's the stuff nobody talks about. Wool socks weren't optional. Pirates stuffed their feet into multiple pairs because frostbitten toes meant you couldn't work the rigging. Same logic applied to fingers and ears. Wool scarves got wrapped around necks, faces, whatever needed protecting. Makes sense, right? Heavy boots saved lives too. Pirates would stuff anything they could find into boot soles, rags, straw, even paper from captured ships. The goal was creating air pockets that trapped warm air around feet. Numb feet on a slippery deck meant a quick trip overboard. Well, some crews took things further. Pirates raiding northern territories discovered animal fur made excellent jacket lining. They'd skin seals, bears, whatever they hunted for food, then sew the fur inside coats and vests. Wasteful? Not when survival depended on staying warm enough to function. The weird part is how organized this became. Successful pirate crews developed clothing rules. New members got lectures about layering techniques. Veterans shared tricks about keeping wool dry and rotating socks. These weren't fashion choices. They were battle tactics against an enemy that killed silently. But clothing only solved part of the problem. Pirates needed warmth that lasted beyond what fabric could provide. They couldn't just bundle up and hope for the best when temperatures dropped below freezing for weeks at a time. And here's something most people never consider. Wooden ships amplified cold problems. Wood conducted cold from water straight into living spaces. Metal fittings became ice traps. Canvas sails turned rigid in extreme temperatures. Pirates wearing proper layers still faced the challenge of heating confined spaces without burning down their only shelter. That's where the real ingenuity began. Because when your floating home becomes an icebox, you need heat sources that won't accidentally turn your wooden ship into a floating bonfire. Fire was the absolute worst nightmare for any pirate ship. Makes sense, right? You're floating on what's basically a giant wooden matchbox, surrounded by miles of water that'll kill you just as dead as the flames. One spark in the wrong place, and your entire vessel becomes a floating bonfire in about 10 minutes. But here's the thing. Pirates still needed heat to survive those brutal northern waters. Hypothermia doesn't care how tough you think you are. So they got creative with braziers and coal boxes. These weren't your backyard barbecue grills. We're talking about specially designed metal containers that could hold burning coal or charcoal without letting flames escape. Think of them as the ship's version of a space heater, except one wrong move and everyone becomes fish food. The trick was placement. Smart pirates kept these braziers in the center of rooms, far away from anything that could catch fire. No sails overhead, no ropes dangling nearby. Definitely no barrels of gunpowder within 50 feet. Common sense, but you'd be surprised how many crews learned this lesson the hard way. Well, some captains were so paranoid about fires they banned open flames entirely. Can't blame them, really. But this created a whole new problem. How do you stay warm without actual fire? Pirates discovered that heated stones worked like medieval hand warmers. They'd heat up rocks near the galley fire, then wrap them in cloth and carry them to sleeping quarters. These stone heaters could stay warm for hours. The same trick worked with sandbags and metal pans. Heat them up, wrap them carefully, and suddenly you've got portable warmth that won't burn your ship down. The weird part is how paranoid everyone became about fire safety. Pirates would assign specific crew members to watch the braziers at all times. No dozing off. No wandering away for a quick drink. Your job was to stare at that fire and make sure it stayed exactly where it belonged. Then there were the emergency protocols. Every brazier had sand buckets nearby for instant fire suppression. Water barrels too, though dumping seawater on a coal fire creates some pretty nasty smoke. But when your choice is between choking on smoke or becoming a human torch, most pirates chose the smoke. Some ships developed elaborate ventilation systems around their heating areas. Carefully positioned gaps in the deck planking would let heat rise while keeping flames contained. It was like early ship engineering, except designed by guys who probably couldn't read, but definitely knew how to survive. The most successful pirate crews treated their heating systems like sacred rituals, specific procedures for lighting fires, moving heated objects, and extinguishing flames. Boring? Absolutely. But staying alive tends to be worth a little boredom. Of course, all this careful fire management created another challenge. Where exactly could pirates get reliable heat that didn't involve these dangerous flames? The galley stove wasn't just where pirates cooked their grub. It was basically the heart of the ship when temperatures dropped below freezing. These brick-built beauties held onto heat like a miser clutches his gold coins, radiating warmth for hours after the last pot of stew came off the flames. Smart pirates figured out early that timing was everything. Cook breakfast, and the stove pumped out heat. Prepare lunch, more warmth. Evening meal, even better. The trick was keeping those cooking shifts rotating so the galley never went completely cold. Like a relay race, but with soup ladles instead of batons. During brutal storms, the galley became prime real estate. Pirates would crowd around that brick stove like moths to a lamp, fighting for the closest spots. Well, not literally fighting. Nobody wanted to anger the cook who controlled their next meal, but you'd see grown men suddenly volunteering for kitchen duty when the wind started howling through the rigging. The heat spread beyond just warming bodies, though. Steam from boiling pots added moisture to the dry, frigid air. Hot metal surfaces dried out wet clothes faster than leaving them in a freezing cabin. Even the wooden planks around the galley absorbed warmth and released it slowly throughout the night. But here's where ship size mattered more than a captain's ego. Large vessels had spacious galleys where 20 or 30 pirates could huddle together, sharing stories and body heat while the stove worked its magic. Smaller ships, those poor souls were packed tighter than sardines around a tiny cooking area, elbowing each other for every inch of warm space. Then there's the genius move some pirates discovered, keeping pots of water simmering even when they weren't cooking. The constant steam and heat turned the galley into a makeshift sauna. Sure, it used extra fuel, but hypothermia killed faster than empty coal bins. Smart cooks became the most popular crew members during cold spells. They'd time bread baking for late evening, ensuring the oven stayed hot through the worst nighttime temperatures. Some even heated serving bowls and plates, giving pirates a few extra minutes of warmth in their hands. The galley stove also served double duty for heating other essentials. Metal buckles, belt hardware, and even weapons got warmed up before use. Nothing worse than grabbing a freezing cold cutlass when you needed to defend the ship. And let's not forget the psychological boost. Hot food from a warm kitchen reminded pirates they weren't completely at nature's mercy. That brick stove represented civilization, comfort, and survival rolled into one smoky, glorious package. Of course, when the cooking was done and the stove started cooling down, pirates needed other strategies to stay alive through those brutal nights. The real test came when darkness fell and temperatures plummeted even further. When the sun disappeared and temperatures dropped below freezing, pirates faced a brutal reality. Individual warmth wasn't just about comfort, it was about staying alive until morning. The solution? Packed together like sardines in a can. Below deck, pirates abandoned any notion of personal space. 20 or 30 men would cram into quarters designed for half that number. Body heat became their primary heating system, and it actually worked surprisingly well. Human bodies generate roughly the same heat as a 100-watt light bulb, so imagine 20 of those bulbs crammed into a small wooden box. But this wasn't just random pile-up sleeping. Pirates developed a rotation system that would make modern shift workers jealous. The warmest spots, usually the center of the sleeping area and near the galley, were reserved for crew members coming off the coldest watches. Makes sense, right? The poor soul who just spent 4 hours battling icy winds deserved the prime real estate. Meanwhile, those about to head topside got the outer edges where they'd naturally cool down before facing the brutal cold. Then there's the blanket situation. Most pirate ships carried fewer blankets than crew members. Economics. Really, blankets took up cargo space that could hold more valuable plunder. This shortage forced even more creative sleeping arrangements. Pirates would layer themselves like human shingles, sharing whatever covering they had. The crew learned to sleep in synchronized positions. Everyone faced the same direction, knees bent, creating maximum contact for heat transfer. When one person needed to turn over, the entire row would flip together like a coordinated dance troupe. Veterans called it turning the human pancake. And the weird part is, this system prevented hypothermia deaths that claimed countless sailors on other vessels. While proper naval ships maintained rigid sleeping hierarchies that left lower ranks freezing alone, pirates' egalitarian approach to survival kept more crew members alive through harsh voyages. Well, there was one major downside nobody talks about in the romanticized pirate stories. Hygiene wasn't exactly a priority at sea. Imagine 30 unwashed men who haven't changed clothes in weeks, packed together in a space with no ventilation. The smell could knock a seagull out of the sky. But pirates had a saying, better stinking and alive than frozen and dead. Hard to argue with that logic. Some crews took communal sleeping so seriously they'd assign heat marshals, experienced pirates who monitored the sleeping arrangements to ensure maximum warmth distribution. These veterans knew which crew members ran naturally hot or cold, organizing the human furnace for optimal efficiency. The smartest pirates realized that surviving meant swallowing pride and embracing the stench. However, even the most cramped sleeping quarters couldn't provide all the warmth the crew needed during extended northern voyages. Nothing beats a steaming bowl of porridge when you're freezing your bones off at sea. Pirates knew this better than anyone. Hot food wasn't just about filling empty stomachs, it was literally life insurance against the cold. The galley became command central for warmth strategy. Smart pirates timed their shifts around meal preparation. Why? Because standing near that brick stove while stew bubbled away meant precious minutes of actual warmth. Your fingers could finally bend again. Your toes remembered they existed. But here's where it gets interesting. Pirates didn't just eat hot food, they weaponized it against the cold. They'd wrap their hands around metal bowls of soup, letting the heat seep through frozen fingers. Some clever crew members even tucked warm bowls inside their coats for a few extra minutes of portable heating. Makes sense, right? Then there's the drink situation. Rum and grog weren't just for getting rowdy after a successful raid. These drinks created what doctors today know is false warmth. But false warmth still felt pretty damn good when ice was forming on the rigging. The alcohol made blood vessels expand, sending warm blood to cold extremities. Sure, it didn't actually raise body temperature, but it fooled the brain into thinking everything was fine. Well, at least temporarily. Pirates often heated their rum over galley fires, creating steamy toddies that warmed them from the inside out. The ritual itself boosted morale. Nothing says we're going to survive this frozen hell quite like sharing hot drinks with your shipmates while the wind howls outside. Let's not forget the tactical side of warm eating. Crew members returning from dangerous night shifts got first dibs on hot meals. This wasn't charity. It was a survival strategy. A hypothermic pirate couldn't fight, couldn't work, and definitely couldn't help raid the next merchant vessel. And the weird part is how creative they got with ingredients. During Arctic raids, pirates melted ice and snow for cooking water. Some mixed hot animal fat into their porridge for extra calories and internal heating. Disgusting? Absolutely. Effective? You bet. The timing of hot meals became almost ceremonial. Morning porridge kicked off the day with internal warmth. Evening stew provided comfort before facing another brutal night. Between meals, pirates sipped heated water or weak broth, anything to keep something warm flowing through their systems. But why stop at just eating warm food when you could use it for heating too? Some pirates placed heated pots and pans from the galley into their sleeping areas, creating makeshift warming devices that radiated heat long after the food was gone. Smart captains understood that well-fed, warm crews performed better than hungry, frozen ones. They prioritized fuel for cooking fires even when other supplies ran low. However, all the hot food in the world meant nothing if your ship was bleeding heat through every crack and gap. When your floating wooden home is being battered by icy winds and freezing spray, you better believe those pirates got creative with keeping the cold out. And trust me, they had some tricks that would make modern contractors jealous. Tar became their best friend. Not the road stuff we know today, but thick, sticky pine tar that pirates slathered over every crack and joint they could find. They'd heat it up in the galley until it flowed like honey, then brush it into deck seams and hull joints. The smell was absolutely terrible. Imagine a campfire mixed with dead fish, but it worked like magic. Once that tar cooled and hardened, it created a seal tighter than a miser's purse. But here's where things get interesting. Canvas wasn't just for sails anymore. Smart pirates would take damaged sails and wrap them around railings, doorways, and any opening where wind could sneak through. Think of it as the world's first weather stripping, except it flapped around like laundry in a hurricane. Effective? Absolutely. Elegant? Not so much. The sleeping quarters got special attention. Extra blankets, old sails, even stolen curtains from raided ships. Anything fabric got draped over sleeping areas. Pirates created little fabric caves below deck, trapping warm air like a cozy tent. Sure, it looked like a floating thrift store explosion, but when you're trying not to freeze to death, fashion takes a back seat. Then there's the really clever stuff. These guys would stuff anything into cracks and gaps. Rags torn from old clothes, straw from cargo holds, even horsehair if they'd raided the right merchant vessel. One captain I read about actually used pages from stolen books to plug holes. Nothing says practical piracy like using someone's diary to keep the wind out. Some northern crews got really ambitious with double-planked hulls. They'd essentially build a ship within a ship, creating an air gap for insulation. Imagine wearing two coats with a pocket of air between them. Same principle, just scaled up to pirate ship size. The downside? These ships were heavier than a treasure chest full of gold, making them slower than a one-legged sailor climbing rigging. Canvas doors became another favorite trick. Pirates would hang thick canvas sheets in doorways and passages, creating airlocks before airlocks were even a thing. Walking through the ship felt like pushing through heavy curtains at a theater, but it kept warm air where it belonged. The really desperate crews would even stuff animal fur, from rats they'd caught to pelts from raided settlements, into gaps between deck planks. Gross? Definitely. But when your toes are turning blue, you stop being picky about your insulation materials. Well, all these ship improvements were nice, but pirates weren't too proud to steal ideas from others. Pirates weren't known for their humility, but when it came to surviving Arctic waters, even the toughest sea dogs had to swallow their pride. The smartest captains quickly figured out that copying techniques from experienced polar sailors wasn't just clever, it was essential for keeping their crews alive. Whaling ships and Arctic explorers had been battling frozen seas long before pirates decided those icy waters looked profitable. These seasoned sailors had already figured out the hard truths about survival through years of bitter experience and plenty of frozen corpses. Well, pirates being pirates, they decided to skip the trial and error phase and steal the best ideas instead. The layering system that polar veterans used became pirate gospel in northern waters. But here's where it gets interesting. Arctic sailors didn't just throw on random clothes, they had a specific science to it. The base layer stayed dry, the middle layer trapped air, and the outer shell blocked wind and spray. Pirates who ignored this system often ended up as human popsicles before they could spend their stolen treasure. Heated sandbags were another brilliant Arctic invention that pirates adopted faster than you could say, "shiver me timbers." Polar sailors would heat sand in metal pans over the galley fire, then stuff it into canvas bags. These makeshift heating pads went straight under bedding or inside coats. The sand held heat for hours, much longer than stones or metal alone. Makes sense, right? Sand has all those tiny particles storing warmth, creating a portable heat source that didn't require constant tending. Then there's the spitting test. Sounds gross, but Arctic veterans swore by it. They taught pirates to spit a small amount of water onto heated stones to check temperature. If it sizzled and disappeared instantly, the stone was too hot and would burn skin or fabric. If it just sat there, the stone wasn't warm enough to be worth the effort. The perfect temperature made the water dance and steam before evaporating. This simple trick prevented countless burns and wasted heating stones. Arctic sailors also introduced pirates to the concept of heat rotation. Instead of everyone fighting for the warmest spots, experienced crews organized systematic sharing. The coldest crew members got first access to heated areas, while those coming off warm galley duty moved to cooler spots. This prevented anyone from getting dangerously cold while keeping the group functioning as a team. But the weird part is how quickly these survival techniques spread across pirate networks. A successful method learned from Arctic whalers in Greenland waters would somehow appear among Caribbean pirates within months. Information traveled faster than the ships themselves, passed along in port taverns and during brief encounters at sea. The pirates who survived Arctic raids weren't the toughest or meanest. They were the ones smart enough to learn from others' mistakes. Pride might keep you warm in a fight, but stolen wisdom from polar experts kept you alive in frozen seas where even the salt water tried to kill you.